Hello learners, welcome back to the course on Learning and Development in Organization. We move to the last session of this module where we are looking into the evaluation patterns, the evaluation of learning and development initiatives. Today, we'll sum it up and we'll try to understand what this evaluation leads to. In other words, I'm trying to decipher what will be the utility or how will we understand the utility of every learning and development initiative. This is what our agenda would be today. I'm Dr. Cyril. Issac. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Business, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. Starting from today's theme, we'll see that a training program can be technically sound, well delivered and engaging, but it doesn't improve how people work. Its utility then is questionable. This is what will be the underlying thought for today when we discuss the utility part of all the learning and development initiatives. Let's start discussing what do you understand by utility. Let's try to define utility in the L&D interventions. When you talk about learning and development, utility refers to the practical value, relevance and effectiveness of training or developmental interventions in meeting both individual and organizational goals. So it could be individual learning objectives or even the broader organizational goals. So it evaluates, if you ask me, whether an intervention truly contributes to meaningful outcomes, including, let's say, improved performance, as we have already seen, or maybe behavior change. This is also something which is very critical, behavior change. Or maybe it could be the strategic alignment, which we have already seen in the previous session, beyond just delivering the content. So it goes beyond the content delivery. We have to understand what is the possible change that is happening with respect to the behavior. So as Salas et al. 2012 state, utility reflects how useful and aligned training is with desired outcomes at all levels, be it individual, be it team and organization. So utility is not limited to whether learning has occurred, but whether that learning has translated into real world application and impact at multiple levels, including individual, team and organization. So you have to typically understand that utility in learning evaluation refers to the degree to which training is useful, it is practical and contributes to desired organizational outcomes specifically. Now let's do some interesting analysis. Let's make a check between utility versus ROI on a broader perspective. So when you're looking into ROI, we had tremendous discussions over the previous module. While return on investment, you will agree with me, focuses primarily on the quantifiable financial returns, that is, specifically the cost benefit analysis. Utility includes both the tangible and the intangible outcomes. So if you understand the scope, the utility in its broader sense includes learning, it will include the satisfaction, it will include application, the cultural alignment, your perceived value, all these factors will come under the scope. Whereas if you look into ROI, it's more narrow. It is only looking into the financial return element in relation to the investment. Whether you look into it from the narrow angle or broad angle, we have to understand that utility is more of a better scale or evaluating parameter specifically towards learning and development initiative, because we are looking into a training program, a learning program where you have to have application, where you have to have some alignment with the organizational objectives as well as the cultural elements, and you should also get a perceived value. So typically utility is definitely considered as a superior rating. When you're looking into the outcomes part, when you make a comparison between utility and ROI, behavioral change, strategic alignment again, and employee engagement and capability building are coming under the part of utility. Whereas You look into ROI, it's more of the financial aspect. So you look into the productivity, you look into the sales, typically the efficiency, and what is the possible cost reduction that you are going to get. And this will be the outcome. When you're looking into the measurement part, utility looks into both the qualitative and quantitative aspect. It has a exploratory angle also. An exploratory angle because it looks into the qualitative methodology as well. Whereas when you are concerned with ROI, it is all about being quantitative. It is all about checking the financial elements of the organization or the learning and development initiatives. So it is primarily quantitative. When you look into the stakeholder view, in case of the utility, it includes employee, it includes manager and the organizational perspective. So you will see a holistic involvement across the organization when you talk about utility. Whereas when you are talking about ROI, it's mainly focused on leadership or just the investor interest. So this is what makes it more narrow when compared to the utility part. Now let's quickly look into the intangibles. What do utility capture? Or when we are making a comparison between utility and ROI, what is typically the intangibles and what is the relative importance of measuring utility? Let's look into the intangibles. Utility captures improved learner confidence or morale of the particular individuals that are involved in the learning initiatives. They certainly look into the increased team collaboration or facilitate that. It also has cultural shifts towards continuous learning coming into picture, and perceived fairness and inclusivity in development opportunities are also part of this utility. When you're looking into the importance, please understand we are looking into evaluating utility, and it helps organization determine what works and why. These two important questions are clearly answered when you're looking into the utility part, especially the evaluation part of utility. You tend to prioritize interventions that drive change. You tend to align learning with strategic priorities. You enhance the stakeholder buy-in for future all learning and development investments. And you promote a culture of evidence-based learning. So these are some of the typical aspects which we have already seen that caters to learning and development. So please note, a learning initiative can be technically sound, it can be well delivered and engaging, but if it doesn't improve how people work, its utility is questionable. This is what we started with. Now let's look into utility as a bridge between learning and strategy. So till now we have not ventured into this, where we are comparing learning and strategy. Please understand, high utility L&D programs are not isolated training events, but they are strategic enablers that typically drive long-term capability development. So we see that they ensure that learning solves all the real business problems. It is relevant to changing job roles and future skills, and necessarily it is accessible and applicable to all diverse learner needs. So this typical view of utility aligns with the modern performance consulting approach in L&D, which emphasizes diagnosing needs, designing for application, and continuously improving based on feedback and results. So if you have the time and bandwidth, I would suggest you go through the paper Robinson and Robinson 2008 that typically underscores the importance of utility as a bridge between learning and strategy. So what do we understand here? As a part of utility being a bridge between learning and strategy, we understand that while the return on investment being a good measure, it offers an essential financial lens. Utility provides a holistic measure of learning effectiveness. So it encompasses your learning acquisition, your behavioral application, your cultural integration, your strategic contribution. So evaluating utility reinforces that learning and development is not just a support function, rather it is a driver of performance and transformation. Let's understand the different dimensions of utility in L&D interventions now. So utility in learning and development, if you ask me, is multifaceted, reflecting not only the effectiveness of learning delivery, but also its contribution to individual performance and broader organizational outcomes. So you look into the different dimensions of utility in L&D interventions, you see the first one, learning effectiveness. Please note, this dimension assesses whether learners have gained the intended knowledge, the skills and attitudes as a result of the intervention. So you see certain measurement methods like the pre and post tests, simulations or case studies, quizzes or skill demonstrations. Please recollect on the different types of learning methodologies we have discussed in the previous module. So your measurement methods also vary around those typical methods, those typical types of analysis and those typical ways to get to results. When you look into the importance, a foundational measure, without learning, there can be no transfer or impact. This is something that you have to understand. As an example, let's take a data analysis course. So after a data analysis course, if employees demonstrate improved proficiency in whatever tools they were trained, like let's say Excel or Power BI, then you see that yes, there is learning effectiveness. So learning is a necessary precursor to transfer, but not sufficient in itself. I repeat the words of Kirkpatrick 2006. Learning is a necessary precursor to transfer, but not sufficient in itself. Let's understand the transfer of learning now, the second dimension of utility in L&D interventions. When you talk about the transfer, it refers to whether learners can apply acquired knowledge and skills effectively in their actual work environment. So this is a key predictor of training impact. So you have some of the associated theories that gave some clear ideas with respect to the transfer of learning. You have Baldwin and Ford as old as 1988 who outlined that transfer is influenced by learner characteristics. It's influenced by training design. It's influenced by the work environment. So all these parameters are vital. You talk about the measurement methods, you have the 360-degree feedback, something which we have categorically discussed. You have the observation methods, the performance matrix, which we also have seen across the previous module. So is the supervisor report. So measurement methods are part of a transfer of learning. They give us a check, a real-time understanding of what is happening with respect to the transfer of learning. If I want to take an example, I'll take an example of sales employees using new negotiation techniques learned in a workshop during their real client interactions. So I have to borrow the words of Baldwin and Ford 1988, and I will make this statement: the ultimate test of training is not learning but transfer. I repeat, the ultimate test of training or learning is not learning but transfer. So transfer of information, transfer of knowledge, knowledge dissemination, these are the vital aspects when you discuss the dimensions of learning, especially the transfer of learning. You look into the third important dimension, that's the organizational impact. So this dimension links learning interventions to tangible business outcomes, such as, say, increased productivity or quality. It looks into improved customer satisfaction. It looks into reduced error rates or turnaround times, enhanced employee engagement or retention. So what is the alignment? It corresponds to level 4 of the Kirkpatrick's model, that is the results. We have discussed this in the previous few lectures. So you look into an example. We take an example of a customer service training that leads to measurable improvements in customer satisfaction scores and complaint resolution times. So if you ask me towards organizational impact, we have categorically understood that this will be an effective measure with respect to what we see in terms of learning dimensions. Now we move on to the next important dimension, which is cost effectiveness. Look into the cost effectiveness. It refers to assessing whether the benefits of the training outweigh the costs involved. So considering both the direct costs. Direct could be like something like fees, materials, trainer, all these aspects which typically come under the direct cost. You also have typically some of the indirect costs that are part of the training program, like time away from work, opportunity cost, expenditure, all these aspects. So when you're looking into the typical cost effectiveness part, you have to understand that ROI calculation is one of the significant tool, which again was developed by Phillips 1997. The cost benefit analysis is also there. You have ROI formula, which we have already seen, but for people who are just attending this session, monetary benefits minus the training costs divided by training costs into 100. That's the ROI percentage. So let's take an example, a leadership program, let's say costing 5 lakh Indian rupees, results in improvement with respect to 10 lakh Indian rupees in improved operational efficiency within a particular year. Then you see that there is cost effectiveness that is associated with the learning and development intervention. Now let's look into learner satisfaction and motivation. Learner satisfaction and motivation, this dimension evaluates how learners perceive the training in terms of its relevance, in terms of its quality and applicability. So high satisfaction often correlates with higher motivation and future engagement in learning. So you look into the measurement tools, you have some of the critical end of the course surveys, the NPS, which we have discussed in the previous module, net promoter score, the reflective feedback. You look into the importance part, while it is subjective, please note, positive learner perception enhances the knowledge retention and transfer altogether. So typically you will have a understanding with respect to the measurement and importance. Let's take an example. Learners rate a digital marketing workshop highly for its practical content and delivery format. So there it's not about the cost parameters. This is something which you have to understand when you are looking into the training part. Sometimes you have cost parameter. You see that I have invested, like in the previous example, we saw that we have invested, let's say, INR 1 lakh Indian rupees. So what is the return? We have seen that because of the optimization of the operational excellence that was achieved, we have got a return of, let's say, 10 lakh rupees. But does it end there? We have to also see that whether the training or learning has increased the employee engagement, has it increased the employee satisfaction? So these are also some of the aspects that we have to be very clear on. We have to understand not only the cost effective parameters. Let's say that's why Phillips ROI method has certain significance, there is no doubt about it. But that said, more than that, people are more interested in knowing whether there is actual employee engagement that has happened after the learning process. So this is what delineates, this is what differentiates between a hardcore cost benefit analysis and a perception based analysis. So please note, when you're talking about the utility part, utility does not only look into the return on investment. It is a certain parameter. It is one of the finest or the topmost priority parameter. There is no doubt about it. There is no denying the fact. But that said, you also look into the perception. You look into how effective, let's say you conducted a training program, you conducted a learning and development initiative in your organization. People are talking good about it. They are feeling good about it. They are excited to attend the second version of that. That makes the real difference. That is why this perception-based utility discussions also need to happen in an organization. Let's understand this in a more critical fashion with respect to the different other parameters, including the strategic alignment. When we talk about the strategic alignment, which is a sixth dimension that we'll discuss today as part of the utility in L&D intervention specifically, you will see that strategic alignment evaluates whether the L&D intervention is coherent with and supportive of the broader organizational objectives. Let's say like digital transformation, like innovation, leadership pipeline development, or cultural change. So you look into the indicators, you see that there is alignment with strategic workforce plans, competency framework, or transformation roadmaps. If I want to take an example of resilience, an adaptability module aligned with the company's post-pandemic strategy for agile working, that is very much critical. So you look into the CIPD definition or statement. I'll try to reiterate it here. Strategically aligned learning and development is not just training. Please note, it's a business accelerator. I repeat, it's a business accelerator. Whatever you see as a strategically aligned L&D, it is not just training, it's a business accelerator. Now let's look into the different measuring utility methods and metrics. We'll start with the quantitative methods. When you look into measuring utility, the methods and metrics part, there is no denying the fact that evaluating the utility of learning and development intervention involves collecting data that demonstrates their effectiveness, their efficiency, and impact. So a mix of quantitative and qualitative methods supplemented with the blended evaluation frameworks provides a comprehensive approach to utility measurement. So if you look into the quantitative methods, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please note that you will have different methods, pre and post test. The purpose is obviously to assess knowledge, the skill gain. The best use case here would be cybersecurity training that shows a certain percentage of improvement in test score. So that's why pre and post test. Any sort of biomedical test will also be part of it, where you are using a particular experimental setup, some placebo arrangements, and then you do a pre and post test. So there are typical examples that are related to pre and post test. Other significant methods include the surveys. When you talk about the survey part, it capture learner satisfaction. It can gauge the motivation. It can look into the perceived relevance and self-assessed learning. So maybe it's a Likert scale, maybe 5-point Likert scale, 7-point Likert scale. Example question that you come across: I feel confident applying the skills learned in my job. 1 would be strongly disagree, to 5 being strongly agree. This could be another way to find it out. The third would be the KPIs, the key performance indicators. The purpose is simple: to track organizational metrics influenced by learning. You will have different examples for this. Let's take an example: sales growth, post-sales training, or maybe reduced error rates in production, or maybe improved customer satisfaction after service training. These can be some of the typical KPIs. You look into the ROI, return on investment. We see that there's a measure that goes with the financial return on training. So ROI, again, net profit by total investment into 100. That would be the formula. So you see that there are certain net program benefits. There are some monetary benefits. So net program benefits would be monetary benefits minus the program cost. Let's say a leadership program costing rupees 5 lakh INR generates INR of 8 lakh in performance improvement. So ROI is what? It's almost 60%. So if I have to borrow the words of Phillips 1997, I would say unequivocally that when training is measured financially, it speaks the language of business. I repeat, when training is measured financially, it speaks the language of the business. Now let's look into some of the qualitative methods. Having seen the quantitative methods, this will be more exploratory in nature. These methods explore the perceived value. They explore the context. They explore the impact of L&D through descriptive insights. So that is what brings us to focus groups. That is what brings us to interviews. So the purpose would be to explore, understand participant experiences, their motivation and challenges. So example would be, post-program focus group reveals that coaching support was more helpful than e-learning modules altogether. Or you will look into the observation part, observation of behavioral change. The purpose would be to observe application of skills on the job. Where you look into, as an example, would be managers report increased use of feedback techniques post-training. There could be some success case studies, case study method or case study research, which highlight a team that exceeded KPIs, after applying learning from a team building intervention. That could be a good example. So I will try to use the quote of Brinkerhoff 2003, where the researcher suggests that success case method uncovers not just if training works, but how it works in real settings. I repeat, success case method uncovers not just if training works, but how it works in real setting. Then we have some blended metrics. When you talk about blended metrics, it's more of a holistic evaluation. L&D professionals often use blended approaches such as Kirkpatrick's, 4-level model, which incorporates both quantitative and qualitative. So you have the reaction, the focus would be learner satisfaction. We have seen this. The example would be post-training survey metrics. Or then for learning, you have the knowledge or skill gain being the focus. You can take the example of pre-post tests. Then the level would be behavior. The focus would be on the job application. Example would be observations or interviews. Then there will be results, where the focus would be business impacts and, the example would be KPIs, ROIs, etc. You look into the benefits of blended metrics, I would say, provides a comprehensive picture of utility, enable triangulation, cross-validating results from multiple sources. So align both learner-centric and business-centric perspectives. So no single method tells the full story. Blending data creates credibility. I repeat, no single method tells the full story. Blending data creates credibility. Now let's quickly look into the factors influencing utility in learning and development. When we talk about the utility of any learning and development initiative, something which I've already discussed, but I would like to reiterate here, it is that it's not solely determined by its content or delivery. Instead, it is influenced by a constellation of factors ranging from diagnosis and design to support structures and organizational environment. So you see, understanding these actors helps in maximizing the impact and the practical value of all the L&D interventions. Let's look into this need analysis quality as the first factor. You'll see that the foundation of a high utility L&D program lies in how well initial learning needs are diagnosed. So this training need analysis, the diagnosis part makes it all the more critical. So the issue would be, poor or surface level analysis could actually lead to irrelevant training content. But then if we look into the larger impact, we can definitely say without any glitch that misaligned learning wastes resources and fails to address the real gaps. Let's take an example. Let's say delivering advanced Excel training to employees who need basic Excel skills could possibly result in poor engagement and minimal impact. So who needs what? Based on that clear understanding or analysis only you have to proceed. So the best practice would be to use, let's say, in a technology-driven world, use more robust diagnostic questionnaires and involve stakeholders during the training need analysis. The second important factor would be the instructional design. When we talk about the instructional design, it determines how well content aligns with objectives and engages learners. So you see, in case of instructional design, you see clear learning outcomes, you see active learning strategies like case studies or simulations. You look into the feedback loops and opportunities for reflection as part of it. You see impact. It enhances the retention, it enhances the relevance and the learner engagement. An example could be, let's say, a blended program using micro-learning, video demos, and practical exercises that leads to better application than a passive webinar. So well-structured design improves utility by making learning engaging, by making learning relevant and applicable. The third important factor which comes to my mind is managerial support. When you talk about managers, they play a pivotal role in encouraging and reinforcing learning on the job, no doubt about it. So there might be different forms of support, like allowing time for training, discussing learning goals pre and post training, or monitoring application of skills. So what is the impact? It increases accountability and boosts transfer of learning to the workspace. So let's look into the typical example. When we look into teams with managers who regularly discuss training outcomes, they report high behavior change. So please note, if I have to again borrow the words of Baldwin and Ford, 1988, learning is not just an event, it's a supported process. I repeat, learning is not just an event, it's a supported process. The fourth important factor which I would like to discuss today as part of factors influencing utility in L&D would be organizational culture. A learning-friendly culture, no doubt, promotes experimentation, it promotes feedback and continuous improvement. So you look into characteristics like tolerance for mistakes and learning curves, encouragement of knowledge sharing, and valuing development at all levels. So it converts learning into collective and sustained behavior. So Watkins and Issac, 1993, identify these dimensions such as systems thinking or inquiry or collaboration as cultural enablers. The fifth important dimension or the factor that influences utility in L&D would be learning transfer climate. When you look into the learning transfer climate, please note the environment and conditions that support the application of learning in the workplace. So you'll have critical elements like post-training, coaching and mentoring. You will have opportunities to apply new skills. You will have feedback mechanisms. So you see that the impact is that it reinforces learning and prevents skill decay. As an example, I can say that organizations that offer post-training peer support groups show better behavior change metrics altogether. So supportive transfer climate is a bridge between classroom and performance. The sixth important factor influencing utility in L&D would be technology and accessibility. The platforms and formats used to deliver L&D can influence reach, inclusiveness, and engagement. So when you talk about the advantages, you have the clear advantages of the digital platforms like LMS apps that provide flexibility. Mobile learning increases accessibility, AI analytics, personalized content. You look into the impact, it enhances learner autonomy and reduces barriers to participation. An example could be migrating compliance training to a gamified mobile app can increase the completion rate by 40%. So please note, the medium can amplify the message when technology supports seamless, engaging delivery. Let's now look into some of the practical aspects. I have already promised you, like I will be looking into some of the real world scenarios in the world of practice. I have started it in a couple of the previous lectures. All around the previous modules, we have tried to incorporate it. Towards the fag end, that is this particular module 11 and module 12, we are more focused on the practical implications also. As part of it, I will like to see this IBM's Executive Leadership Development Initiative from a different angle today. So let's understand this particular case. IBM is a global leader in technology and consulting, recognized the urgent need to build a robust leadership pipeline for its global operations. So as part of its strategic talent development agenda, the organization launched a comprehensive executive leadership development program aimed at mid-level managers poised to transition into global leadership roles. So they identified learning need, they identified the objective as preparing high potential managers for for complex, cross-sectional, cross-cultural leadership responsibilities in a rapidly evolving digital and global landscape. The biggest challenge for them was bridging the gap between current managerial capabilities and future leadership competencies needed for global mobility and innovation leadership altogether. So let's now look into what was the intervention strategy. IBM designed a multifaceted leadership development program which incorporated these aspects like immersive simulations to mirror the real world high stakes global business challenges. It personalized the executive coaching to deepen self-awareness and address individual growth areas. It looked into the cross-border mentoring with senior leaders to foster global perspectives and leadership agility. So this intervention aligned with IBM's broader strategic goals of innovation, globalization and digital transformation. Now let's look into the utility dimensions that were realized, because that's what the point of discussion for today is. When we look into the behavioral outcome dimension, please note, behavioral outcome dimension, the evidence or the outcome shows that 40% of participants were promoted within 18 months of completing the program. This is a striking outcome. You look into the strategic alignment part, you'll see that participants demonstrated increased readiness for global mobility and assignments. You look into the ROI measurement part, you will see that financial evaluation revealed an ROI of whopping 370% over 2 years. This is also significant. And when you look into the satisfaction part, learner satisfaction part, you'll see that 92% of the participants rated the experience as transformative and highly relevant. So these were some of the utility dimensions that were realized, and this is what is directly related to today's discussion. So the key insight would be, when leadership development is aligned with strategy, designed around real world complexity, and when measured for impact, it transcends learning. Typically, if you ask me, it drives transformation. So this case exemplifies the power of integrating multiple utility dimensions in L&D evaluation. And typically you see that there is a possibility that they achieved with strategic alignment, which ensured that the program was not generic leadership course but tailored to future organizational needs. There was behavioral tracking, which offered tangible proof of leadership capability development and performance elevation. There was more of an ROI calculation that justified investment and built the business case for continued leadership development. And finally, there was a learner feedback which emphasized the relevance, the psychological impact, increasing future participation and engagement. So ladies and gentlemen, when you look into this particular case, you will see that we have tried to cover all the aspects of evaluation. And now when we transcend to utility, we have not just stuck up with the financial part. We are also looked into the satisfaction element. And this is what I try to ascertain again and again. Please do understand that in case of IBM and in all other situations, wherever you are coming up with a learning and development intervention, it is not only the money that matters. It is what effectiveness the employees feel or they perceive, or they see a staggering, a relevant, a significant impact in the change. This behavioral change is what learning and development is behind. So when you are looking into learning and development initiatives, please do not only consider the financial parameters. Please do not look only into how much effective trainer or resource person he or she is very costly, he is very exotic, we are trying to bring him from some places, so that will incur some cost. It's not only about cost, it's how the learners perceive, how the learners identify with the trainer, how the learners identify with the course, and how the learners effectively develop over a period of time where the learning happens. This is what is significant, and this is what utility means. Thank you for listening to me patiently. We come up with more details of learning and development in the next module. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.